Welcome to VINTed with Scout Driscoll. Come along with me on my journey into the wine world, where I share thoughtful conversations with wine industry leaders. Get ready for marketing insights from branding and design to sales and social media, and the answer to the ultimate question: what moves wine? Hi everyone, I am Scout Driscoll, founder of Vint Studio and host of VINTed, where we chat about all things design and sales. Past episodes include conversations with design veteran Nicole Walsh, who brings 26 years of experience to wine label design, and founder of Vint Social and virtual wine experience expert Sarah Mole. On today's episode, we'll be talking all about owning your own winery and what it's like in the Red Mountain AVA with Shae Frichette, co-owner of Frichette Winery. But before we dive into our conversation, here's a quick note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Vint Wine Branding and Design, where rich storytelling meets smart design. At Vint, our studio goes beyond the label, guiding wine brands through strategy-rich branding and packaging evolutions. And our work with Cooper's Hawk has helped them grow the nation's largest wine club with over 450,000 members. You can learn more about Vint at vint.studio, or for a free label audit for your brand, just email me at hello@vint.studio. So today I'm so excited to introduce you to Shae Frichette, co-owner and assistant winemaker at Frichette Winery. They're in the Red Mountain AVA in Washington State. And also we're going to dive into not only Frichette, but also Shae's own line of lines, Sachet, which I'm super excited about. Welcome so much, Shae.
Thank you. Super stoked to chat with you.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I've had a little bit of a girl crush for like the last couple years on LinkedIn and Instagram. So I'm really excited that you offered to or accepted my request for you to be on the show today. So often I talk to folks like marketing experts or digital advertising experts or people who are kind of in design thinking. And it's so nice to have an opportunity to talk to someone who's literally getting their hands dirty making wine. So I appreciate you joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Scout. It's my pleasure.
So I know that you and your husband, Greg, co-own Frichette, and you guys are in Washington. Can you tell us a little more about the winery and also about the Red Mountain AVA, which is kind of an AVA inside an AVA inside an AVA?
Right. It is. It is. You know, when my husband he's from Tri-Cities. He's from the area, but when he was growing up here, Red Mountain was not an AVA. So it was a huge discovery for him. I'm from South Carolina. He's from here. But when we were living in Southern California, Greg just says, you know what? Life is short. Let's have a baby and let's move closer to our parents. And I assumed that meant we were going to move closer to my parents in South Carolina. And he assumed that we would move closer to his parents in Tri-Cities. So obviously we got into a huge argument about it and neither one of us were giving in. So after a bit, Greg just says, you know what? I'm sick of arguing. Let's leave it to fate. Let's flip a quarter. If it lands on heads, we go to Washington. If it lands on tails, we go to South Carolina. Well, I was 2 glasses of wine in, so I thought that was a brilliant idea. He flips the coin. And that sucker landed on heads for Washington. So I suggested we do best out of 5. And he just goes, nope, we decided wherever it landed, that's where we would move. So that really inspired our discussion about changing careers. I was a corporate trainer and I spent over 20 years in leadership development and corporate training. Greg was in IT. But when we flipped that coin and fate decided that we would be in Washington State, that inspired me to think about, what do I want to do that would give me goosebumps? I mean, how often do we just think about that? Like, what would give me goosebumps? So that took us down this road of discovery. And since we loved wine, crazy enough, we decided we're going to quit our jobs and learn how to make wine and open a winery. I mean, crazy, right?
Crazy. Also, everyone's dream. You did the thing that everyone fantasizes about all the time. I think 95% of Silicon Valley every single day says to themselves, I think I'm just going to give it all up and go make wine. So that's so fascinating
Crazy.
that, you actually lived that life and you guys have ended with an amazing winery to stand for it. I love it.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it really is fun. And being out on Red Mountain, which is discovered but undiscovered, is neat as well. So we love the community and love the wines coming out of that area.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about what you guys are producing.
So we do focus on Bordeaux. And so all 6 of the red Bordeaux's, anything from Merlot, Cab, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec, and new to our portfolio is Carmenere. So a lot of times you'll find those varieties in single varietal. We love doing that. But we also, although Red Mountain's so small, the layout of Red Mountain is pretty diverse. So we'll end up making like 4 cabs from 4 different vineyards
Cool.
on Red Mountain. And so we just get a kick out of doing things like that to really dive in and really showcase the amazing, unique qualities of each of the vineyards on the mountain.
I love it. And is everything estate grown, or are you sourcing fruit from different other vineyards within the mountain?
We source most of our fruit. The crazy thing is the property that we are on, it wasn't for sale. So Greg and I just knocked on their door and begged them to sell to us. And after 4 no's, they finally said yes. But when we purchased that property, they didn't have water right. And water is a huge deal in our area. I mean, a huge deal, because we get less than 8 inches of rain a year. I mean, wine grapes, they don't need a lot of water, but Lord knows they need some water to survive. So since we didn't have water right, we just said, you know what? There are growers who've been growing wine grapes longer than we've been alive. Why don't we work with these growers, put contracts in, so that we, own those, grapes for the growing season. They farm them specific to what we're looking for, and we can still make fantastic wines. And so we've had such a blast working with the growers that although we do have our tiny little estate vineyard, we'll still work with the growers that we've built relationships with.
I love it. I love it. And tell me more about Shae. And you started that in 2020, correct?
And I love how you say that with a little bit of sass already. Sachet.
So I'm thinking of the label, right? Like
sachet.
For those of you just listening, and I don't even know if Shae has a bottle of sachet with her, because we're both remote today. I don't know if you can. If you're not watching the video, you'll see me at home today. And Shae is also out of her office, but the label for a sachet is a very, like kinetic portrait of a woman and dresses twirling. It's just a very fun design.
It's so dope. I love the label and I love sachet and I love making it. A few years ago, I went to this event called Celebration of Black Women in Wine. And I was actually researching like a women's retreat. I kind of felt like I really needed to get out of my space and be inspired. And that's what I was Googling. And this event it came up and I was like, oh my God, this is in a few weeks. I've got to go to this. So I purchased a ticket, booked a flight, and ended up in Miami. And for the first time ever, I'd seen Black female winemakers. And I was just like, where have you been? I never saw like a me, And so I was just incredibly inspired. And I wanted to create a label that was more of an expression of me that I could share. And then on the back of the label, I thought, gosh, I was so inspired to do something different in my business that I want to craft a message that any woman can read. And I hope that they're inspired by that message as well. Where the name comes from is when I was growing up, I used to hear my mom and her sisters say the word sachet, like, look at you sashaying in here like you don't have a care in the world. And I loved that word. So that's why I named it Sachet. It's a play on my name, Shae, but also just because I love the word.
Awesome. And then, so you're the lead winemaker on those wines as well, right?
Yes. So Sachet is my baby. I make the wines for it, source the fruit. It's just, it's my baby.
I love that. And I feel like, for VINTed too, like we're an all woman design studio, 100% woman owned, occupied, operated. And I find the wine industry just has such a really amazing tidal wave of girl power right now. And certainly women of color. Like you think of like the Wine Enthusiast Top 40, like it's such a sea change. And I love that you're designing something, producing something really focused on celebrating women in wine, women of color in wine, the opportunity for people to kind of see themselves in your bottle, which is amazing. So kudos for that.
Thank you.
That's really, really great. And then of course, I feel like everyone did all these amazing things in 2020. Like 2020 was the worst year ever, but it really made me, personally, like a stronger business person. VINTed wouldn't exist without, the pandemic. VINTed is a secondary studio within Design Scout, which is my studio that's been around for almost 20 years. And I wanted to get into the wine world. We've designed for Cooper's Hawk for 8 years. We've done over 100 labels for them. But I was really nervous about reaching out to the broader wine industry because we're in Chicago. And to take the opportunity to hit pause on the rest of our clients, kind of forced pause in a way because of COVID. And we work with a lot of restaurant clients who are all very impacted. VINTed really was born from that opportunity when everything else slowed down and it was time to get brave and it was time to do things that scare you. And so I love that you two had a COVID baby.
COVID baby.
Which is, maybe Sachet was in the works for years before, but it's just a nice representation of that transformative year for so many women, especially in the wine.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, to go back to the coin flip. What is it like to operate a winery with your partner? And do you guys just completely run your business by flip of a coin?
Pretty much.
Nice.
For us, I think what was what was important for us, I realize this now, is that in the very beginning, we talked about roles. And not just, you're good at this, so you do this, and I'm good at this, so I do this. Well, I mean, we did some of that as well, but we also talked about, well, what would make you excited? And maybe you don't have the skill set to do that, but if that's something that you're excited to do and you're excited to learn about, then you get to do that. And I'm going to stay in my lane. So Greg and I say this a lot. We go, stay in your lane, and we respect that. So he's the head winemaker for Frichette, and he really gets to decide barrel program and how long we're aging those. And, I get to come in and give some direction on, but at the end of the day, if we're not agreeing on something, then he'll just go, stay in your lane. I'm like, you're right. That's your role. We decided. And same thing with Shae. He'll give me his opinion and I'll say, nope, I want to do it this way. If he's like, no, I think you should stay in your lane. He's like, you're right. I'm out of your lane. So I think establishing roles early on and then respecting that and trusting trusting Greg and him trusting me was just, gosh, I'm so glad we established that early on.
Yeah. And I think, the idea of choosing a role that you're really passionate about is so important too. Because people who are aspiring winery owners or aspiring winemakers, I think they so often forget that you're so much more than just a winemaker. In some ways you're a farmer, or at least you're selecting the right fruit and partnering with the right, grape growers. But also, it's marketing, it's sales, it's managing a team, it's so many different roles. And so finding what it is about that process that's really inspiring to you and then leaning into it and making sure that you're able to not only do something that you're passionate about, but do it well and allow other people to do their parts well also.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You said that so well, Scout.
That's kind of why I started a podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
And then your book. I'll be buying your book.
Yeah, no. Okay, so you guys have been around for nearly a decade, right? You started in 2009?
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Started in 2013. Yeah, we started in 2011, launched in 2011. We aged those wines for 2 years, but we opened our tasting room in 2013.
Got it. Yeah, so your tasting room's been around for almost a decade. You guys are celebrating, over a decade. I'd love to talk a little bit about, and again, remembering that the folks listening are either considering opening a winery or they're a younger, a growing winery, maybe they're a larger wine executive, who knows? But what is it like in the early days at Frichette? And is there anything that you could share about, a lesson learned from growing pains or any like really cool achievement that you guys unlocked at the very beginning of your earlier days that our listeners might benefit from?
Yeah, for when we started out, we had, and we still have a lot of enthusiasm for the business. And, but it was also very scary. And I don't know if people really, really saw that. An example of that is, we came out strong with 650 cases for 2011, about the same for 2012 and 2013. But in 2014, our vintage was, it was a very small vintage. We had 2 wines. And most folks don't even remember 2014 by Frichette. It was because we ran out of money. Like we literally ran out of money. So you pay for this business for us, the way that we make our wines, and we're aging it for a couple years. You're paying for those 2 years, those 2 vintages you're paying for. So all that money goes into your business and the startup. And then you start to sell, but you're not selling enough to, cover all the costs. And so it was very humbling. And gosh, talk about pivot. That's where we really had to pivot. And so for us, although we had things mapped out, it really was looking at as partners when, you're dealing with that where you're not financially, you're having some difficulties, not letting that get in the way of your relationship. That was really important to us. And we had dialogue about that. So that was a lesson learned of really just making sure that at the foundation, understanding that your relationship is important. The second thing I would say is when you decide who your customer is, making sure that you're servicing that customer. And the example is, we thought that direct to consumer is our business. That's how we sell most of our wine. But we were pouring wines for restaurants that we weren't really a fit for. They didn't have wines at our price point. But instead of understanding that these restaurants still took appointments for us. And so I spent days in Spokane just pouring this wine for restaurants that we weren't a fit for. And unfortunately, I wasted their time and I also wasted my time. And so for me, it's like really understanding who our customer is and letting that just kind of drive what we do with our wines and valuing that. So that would be like that to me was a learning, because I was like, oh, those were a lot of days of just wasting their time and wasting mine too.
Well, that's a huge decision, right? To go DTC or on premise. And I think especially post COVID, that's a whole different formulation now as well. And understanding what is the right way to kind of meet your ideal consumer wherever they're going to be.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
Thanks for sharing that. I feel like too, beyond reaching consumers, where you're reaching them and in DTC or on premise, you guys do a really great job using social. And I would love for you to talk for just a moment, if you can, about, how have you leveraged not only social media, but, your personal brand? I think what I loved about your bio is it is just so filled with you using opportunities like being the board member for the local Chamber of Commerce, which I know you're wrapping up currently out there. Doing things with the American Red Cross. You're so involved in the community, and how have you leveraged that community involvement for also promoting and marketing Frichette? Can we talk a little bit about how that Frichette, how that kind of blends together?
Yeah, look at you, how it blends together. I love it, Scout. Well, I think that to me, I think it's very important, whether you have a business or not, to understand how you can contribute and positively impact your community. So at the end of the day, before Frichette or anything, it really is how we can impact our community. And so I think about things that are important to us, because there's a million different things that you can do, right? And so I just go back to, well, what's important, for me. Small business to me is important. It's important for just for value in the community you live in. It puts folks to work for quality of life. And so that to me is important in being a part of what our local chamber is doing and being able to have a voice. And so that's why I chose to volunteer for the board. So I think that's important. But the other part of it when it comes to Frichette is I also look at, well, how can we serve as a company? What is it that we can do? What resources do we have as a small business in our area that might be able to help out our region? And so I consistently look for ways in that way. And Scout, I have to tell you, I love collaborations. So if there's an opportunity to collaborate, whether it's like our Women in Business Conference, and they were looking for wineries, I was like, well, wait a minute, this is a Women in Business Conference. We have a lot of women in wine.
Yeah.
These women, let's get together and collaborate and be able to do something really special. But and I look across digital media platforms as well, because we are in such, I've never felt like I'm a part of such a virtual world as I've felt in the past couple of years. And that's a great way to collaborate as well. So I always keep my eyes open whenever folks need a resource for something. And I'm not really visible from that standpoint. Like I really don't like to shout on this is what I'm doing. But if someone says, I'm looking to expand here, I'm looking to do this, I love going in their back channel or inbox and saying, hey, I actually have a connection there. Can I introduce you to someone? Or, hey, I know how to do this. Can I help you here? Like those are the sort of things that really make me exciting. It really makes me excited.
Yeah, same here. And I think, from leveraging your own brand's values, we talk a lot about the brand key process. And that's kind of a standard marketing 101, where you walk through 9 steps to brand clarity. I mentioned it in our podcast that went live this week, actually. But one of the parts in that identifying your brand strategy is thinking about your brand's values and beliefs. And not only like putting a stake in the ground about what your brand believes, like Frichette believes in supporting its community, but what are the reasons that people should believe you? So like, what are you doing? How do you really walk the walk and live those values? And I think from a winery perspective, so many wineries are amazing at putting a stake in the ground, whether that's about like regenerative organic farming, or whether that's about using lighter glass for CO2, or whether that's about, I always talk about Tank Winery just being punk rock AF, like not only say you believe in something, but live it. And I love that you're doing that with your brand. It's really inspiring.
Well,
and I think at the end of the day, it probably translates to sales. Now, I know, you're kind of a limited production winery, so you don't have huge production. So sales means a different thing to you than it might mean to a larger production winery. But I always love to wrap up these podcasts by asking my guests, what is the big question, which is, what is your number one piece of advice for increasing sales and moving wine? So if for anyone's listening today, what would you say to them to help them really just move product?
Well, it's one of my lessons learned on understanding who your customer is, and then doing everything you can to make sure that every process you have in your business comes back to the value of that customer. And I think that should transition to anything that you do from a digital media standpoint, hearing their voice, responding to them, hearing what's important to them, and looking in your business and going, well, how can the things that are important to my customers that we're doing, how can we bridge that? How can we maybe pull them in and get them involved or communicate to them about these things that we're doing that's of value to us, but it's also important to them. For us, our wine club is everything. We sell most of our wine, through a large percentage of our wine through our wine club, and having loyal customers and fans is just important. It's so important to us. And we had club members came to us last year during the pandemic, and it was almost like they were just like, our job is to make sure that you're still here next year and the next year and the next year. So when we make choices about how we're going to spend our money, we're going to consider you. And I mean, those are things that just like brings tears to your eyes. That someone says that over these past years, we've seen you and we've heard you, so much so that we're going to make intentional decisions about spending our money, and we choose to spend it with you. We don't take those things for granted, Greg and me, and we really, really appreciate that. So the value, I think it always comes back to your customer, understanding who they are, what's important to them, and looking at the things you're doing in your business and making sure that they align.
I love that. I agree. 100% agree. And it's just so touching to know that not only, your brand goes so far beyond a buzzword of like a lifestyle brand. It's actually a partner with the people who love and value what you do, and you love and value your wine club members. And that's really the ideal situation. So congratulations. It's really, really wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, so I've been talking today to amazing Shae Frichette of Frichette Winery in Red Mountain AVA. Shae, if people want to touch base, how can they learn more about you, and where can they find you?
Here's the thing. If you really want to know more about us, if you go to our website, which is frichettewinery.com, if you send us a message, it always comes to me. It goes to Greg and it goes to Kathy, our wine club concierge. And the next thing I'd say, we love followers on Instagram. It's one of my favorite platforms. LinkedIn is a favorite platform of ours as well. So follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. We're just at Frichette Winery.
Awesome. Shae, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a blast. And everyone enjoy the episode and tune in for the next VINTed.
Tune in for the next VINTed. Subscribe today. For future episodes, marketing advice, and more, follow me on Instagram at Scout Driscoll. Learn more about VINT's design and branding services for wineries at www.vint.studio.